Coming up in The Line of Duty.
An Alabama deputy is in a fight for his life.
During the struggle, I remember vividly saying, man, I'm not gonna make it. This guy's killing me, and I was using every ounce of energy I had.
And on Backup, look at what the Chicago police are doing with In the Line of Duty. They're playing it in every district in the city, not on television, but rather via streaming video, and pioneering the training wave of the future.
This is a start. It's a first step as going toward the digital age and also to the computer technology of what we can do to improve our learning and also our education and training for law enforcement agencies all around the country.
Lessons learned by the officers involved in the line of duty.
How often have you rehearsed for a physical confrontation and lethal force? A confrontation, for example, in which you reach for your gun and it wasn't there. Hello, and welcome to In the Line of Duty. I'm Don Marsh.
I'm Ron Barber at the Chicago Police Department's District 14. You're about to see a terrifying incident in which an Alabama officer nearly lost his life in a ground and gun fight. As you watch and listen, ask yourself, would you have taken the same actions Officer Jay Dempsey did? Deputy Jay Dempsey of the Dallas County, Alabama Sheriff's Office was home on a lunch break. At the time, he was the only officer available to respond to a call for underage drinking, loitering, and possible drug dealing at a low-income housing project. He arrived in his '94 Suburban with his canine Princess. Within seconds of his arrival, this was to become a stop of much greater proportions.
As I rounded the curve the first time, 8 black males exited the area. I continued patrol. I rode around the area a few minutes, notified dispatch that I was going to make another pass at the area, and then I would clear up. As I pulled into the area, nobody left. So I radioed in the vehicle, notified the dispatcher that I would be exiting the vehicle. I gave the address of 800 block of Keesler Drive.
Dempsey activated a video camera he had bought from Sears and ordered the group to disassemble and go on to school. All but one he recognized from prior encounters.
I noticed he had something in his hand, and sticking out both sides of between his finger and thumb was a piece of paper, plastic. Now, I was assigned to the detective division at the time, and I recognized it to possibly be crack cocaine.
One thing Dempsey also noticed was that
he was considerably bigger than me. I stopped him. I asked him what his name was, and he wouldn't tell me. Well, he stuck his hand in his pocket, and when he came back out, nothing was in his hand. I said, "Hey, bud, you don't mind if I pat you down, do you?" He said, "No problem." He rose his hands up. Mistake number one, he was facing me as I patted him down. He just rose his hands up. He had a real baggy set of pants on. As I casually patted him down, I went straight for the pocket that I knew he put something in. I felt a hard rock pebble-like substance. To me, it was consistent with crack cocaine. I kind of shook his pants. When I did, the crack fell out the bottom of his pants. He began to break away. I grabbed him on the arm. I said, "You're under arrest. Just relax."
Now he's still facing you?
He's still facing me.
Okay.
And when he heard the words, "I'm under arrest," he immediately went for my weapon.
with no backup on its way, none even aware there was a real problem, Deputy Dempsey was suddenly fighting for his life.
I grabbed him on his arm. With his other arm, he went for my weapon. And as he went for my weapon, I began to turn, and I put him in the headlock, and we went to the ground. And I constantly tried to calm the situation down, tell him he was under arrest, to relax is over.
Then, unseen on the video, the other gang members slowly moved in.
Somehow or another, we regained our footage. He was much stronger, much stouter fellow than me, and we began to stumble around, and I had an electronic device, bailout system from Premier Bailout on my side. I hit the button, I could hear the door open to the Suburban. When Princess come in, she came in at full speed. She was a heavy German Shepherd. He was on top of me. We went back to the ground. When she engaged him, she knocked him off of me. Well, when she knocked him off, I was able to regain my headlock and move into the camera, from what you begin to see the events unfold from the camera.
In a few furious seconds, two critical elements reared their heads. Dempsey was not trained for ground fighting, and unknown to him in the battle, the subject had gotten the officer's gun.
As I pick up my radio and I call for help, that's when he begins to really gain control of my weapon.
But you don't realize
I'm not realizing this. My gun belt has shifted around to my rear, which the average officer wouldn't realize that there's somebody messing with your gun because it's done shifted around to behind me. It came across my body to my weapon, and I had trained this numerous times for when somebody did go for my weapon to place my hand on theirs and put downward pressure. And that's when we went to the ground because of the downward pressure, and I knew if I could get him on the ground, I'd have the upper up on him versus standing toe-to-toe with a person sizably larger than me. He clears my weapon from the holster, and Princess is just giving him a hard time. She wasn't a really aggressive patrol dog. She was great with kids, and she did narcotics work. Well, he knew he needed to get her off of him, so he swung the Sig Sauer. He struck her and then the ground, causing a stovepipe. It hurts her for a second. She backs away. He puts the weapon to my head and says, "You're gonna die." Pulled the trigger. I heard the trigger hit the housing, and I could just see a weapon out the corner of my eye, and I couldn't understand why it didn't fire. And then as we pull away, I realized that looks like a Beretta. I must have missed that in a pat down. That's a real gun. It's as bad as it's gonna get.
Dempsey's life had been saved because his weapon stovepiped when the subject struck the officer's canine.
I began the surrender position, which they're trained most of the time. If you'll show submission, the bad guy will give you just a few seconds longer. I regained my footing, and when I was regaining my footing on the ground, I remember feeling that feeling that I had ran 10 miles in the cold weather. My arms ached. I was breathing as hard as I could breathe. I remember feeling I need to give up. I need to just let this go. When I was on the ground and the weapon began to appear, it seemed to slow down. I remember thinking, I missed that in the pat down, that I'm gonna die right here. I remember it being real crisply warm that day. I remember things slowing down, and I remember feeling the feeling that I needed to quit because I hurt so bad. I remember thinking that that guy was strong and he was going to win this one. I remember almost for a blink giving up. I remember seeing an image of my child and my wife sitting and thinking, I'll never see him again.
But his academy training kicked in.
And remembering the instructor at the academy telling me, "Hey, you just gonna lay there and die?" I just remember the days from the academy, get up, get up, get up. And when I regained my footing, I could see him trying to fire a weapon. And I was thinking he must have the safety on. And he took a glance around to see where his friends were. And when he took the glance, I made my move. I went for my weapon. It wasn't there. At the time, I remember reaching for that gun, and that was a bad, bad, bad feeling that it wasn't there. And don't know why, but somehow or another, I remember that backup gun being there. I'd been riding there for 3 years, 2 and a half years, and never drew it in line of duty, never had no reason to play with it in line of duty. Your handcuffs and your walkie-talkie, you mess with it constantly. But the backup weapon, only messed with it on the firing range.
Dempsey had carried 2 Uncle Mike handcuff cases on his duty belt. One held 2 pairs of handcuffs, the other a 5-shot AMT 380.
Try to conceal it from the offenders or the bad guys, as you'd say. If they took a look at me, they wouldn't realize that I had a second gun on me. We wore BDU pants in the drug unit, and I had my pants tucked in all the time around the boot or inside the boot, so it wasn't feasible to wear an ankle holster. However, the witnesses just assumed all law enforcement officers carry one on their ankle, so the witnesses stated that I pulled from the ankle, which helped discredit their story.
Packy Dempsey's careful pre-planning was about to save his life.
I remember pulling it, and I remember slowly saying, "Front sight," because that's what I trained on the range. And I remember the weapon coming up, and I remember it hitting about chest level. I remember seeing the gun, and that's when I began to fire. And things started picking up pace then. Things were going downhill. And when the rounds were fired, it was like, and the tunnel vision went away, things just picked up to real time. At the time, on the firing range, I trained double tap, 2 rounds holster, 2 rounds holster. I don't know why I fired. I just remember it was real bad, and I remember trying to beat his bullet to mine. And undoubtedly, I pulled the trigger more times than I'd actually trained, which was something rare. You usually only do what you train. Now I train different. I empty the magazine and before I leave the range. I fired what I thought was 2 rounds. The guy seemed not affected. He just quickly turned away and began to run. And I remember thinking, I missed him, but he's off of me. And tunnel vision began to go away. I saw the other 7 guys standing right behind him in a kind of a horseshoe, and I thought, okay, if I missed him, where did the rounds go? I thought I seen people begin to run, and they were slowly reacting to the gunfire. And it dawned on me, I need to give chase. He has my gun. He needs to go to jail. I pursued him approximately 20 feet, which you see leaving the camera. I observed him. He fell to his side, left side. And as he heard me and the dog approaching, he turned and pointed the weapon at me again. At the time, I recognized it to be mine. He snapped the trigger again. It didn't go off. And then I realized there was a problem with the gun, that I could see the bullet. K9 engaged. I did the twist away. I was able to break the weapon away. I outed her, downed her. She went into a revere. I cleared my weapon. The other guys were coming in. I had a few choice words with them. I don't really remember what I said, but I do remember it kept them off of me.
Dempsey, realizing he had lost his radio, scurried back to retrieve it and go to 00 on the radio. Officer needs assistance.
You hear the dispatcher really come alive then. She says, boys, step it up. This is bad. Something's happened. She advised numerous times that I had a man down. She didn't know if it was me or somebody else. Approximately a minute and a half, the first law enforcement officer arrived on the scene. You could hear him coming from miles and miles around naturally by then. It wasn't until that night when the chief deputy pulled me in, showed me the tape, and gave me the spiel of the administrative duty that I realized I had an empty weapon. Things started really setting in. Man, if he'd have fired that round, I'd have died there anyway. That was when I realized I'd fired 5 rounds. That's something that really sticks out in my mind when the chief called me in and showed me a quick shot of the tape. I remember seeing 5 holes. He had 2 rounds in the upper forearm that exited the rear of the forearm and into the lower part of the body. The other rounds were in the midsection. They were what we trained center mass, and I trained enough to know when I fired, I would fire center mass, and when I missed, that was the total surprise. Man, I trained for this, and I missed, or at what a time I thought I had missed, because he turned ineffective and ran away, what I feared to be ineffective. I was not carrying a hollow point round. I was carrying a ball ammunition because I knew that with a small caliber, you would need penetration. But these thoughts had went through my mind years ago when I purchased the weapon and never really thought nothing else about it. I remember thinking during the struggle with the guy, he must be on drugs. He's so strong. It was later determined he was not on drugs. He had more willingness to not go to jail than I had willingness to take him to jail. I was thinking civil liability. Did I have to use, am I right to use the force? Which now I think different. But at the time, I remember thinking, he wants out of this worse than I want to put him in jail.
Although conscious for a time, the subject never said a word and died on the scene.
I've already exited the vehicle. I approached them and they're starting to leave the area. This is Robert. Listen to the K9. You'll hear when an actual engagement between me and the suspect begins. I'm in the interview. We're talking. About the time you hear the dog fire off in the vehicle, you realize that a confrontation has ensued. I was just asking him at this time for consent to pat him down. Would he put his hands up? All right. The dog realizes there's a struggle. You hear the firing off in the car. If you listen real carefully, you hear the bailout release, and you hear the dog disappear. The sound will disappear from the car. You hear her pouncing around in there. All right, she's now left the vehicle. You hear me ask the dog to come in and help me. Yeah, and now we're coming in. See, she bit me there. I told her to quit. She released, came back around, started helping me. 781, my belt has shifted, so nothing was in its normal place. I reached for the handcuffs.
So you already have your gun?
No, right here. See him reaching for my gun? All right, and the dispatcher has tied me up where I can't talk. I'm trying to get all my information out. She did as quick as she could. All right, he's getting his hands on my gun. I got one handcuff on him here. Strike the dog there. That's when the dog jams, and right there he tells me I'm going to die. And then I realize, you see the gun come in close to the head, and I realize there's a gun problem. You see him trying to pull the trigger. After he strikes a weapon, right there he tries to clear it, which I didn't know was going on. But he raises it back up to fire, and it won't fire. She keeps him busy, distracts him as he looks away. I reach for my weapon and take my moment of opportunity. He realizes I have a gun here. But by then, the shots are already fired. Before the sound, he's turned toward me. All shots were from the front. See my pistol. I start to go back to holster my pistol. And then I realize I'm not on the range anymore. I need to go back out there. See the holes just hitting the ground. I felt at the time I had to go to the standard semi-weaver stance that I trained on the range, because I didn't train really. I really didn't get into the training as far as the sitting down with a backup weapon. Primary, yeah. Backup, no. The actual sound coming back to the camera took a few seconds to cycle through the camera, so therefore the shots sound like they were fired later, but they weren't. Just off screen, he steps back into the screen, or he steps back toward me, is when the rounds are fired. I've approached him, taken my gun from him, came back, got my walkie-talkie. You hear me? I'm 0-0. I have a man down. I'm over there trying to render somewhat first aid, trying to talk to him, trying to tell him his name, trying to determine the extent of the injury. Okay, this is the holster I was carrying. As you can see, the force of the struggle. I've lost a few parts to it during it. All it took was a thumb snap and straight out of the holster, the weapon came out. I've since went to the, this was a SIG. I had personal problems with the SIG. I went to the Glock, went to the security holster. All officers know how the security holster works. With practice, I can draw that security holster just as fast. During the struggle, what is the big thing, the reason the weapon never fired was what was called a stovepipe. The round partially ejected because it wasn't a full cycle. I feel clearly if I had the weapon I have now, I wouldn't be here, because the Glock, this particular weapon, doesn't have the full feed cycle as this one does. For a backup weapon, I carry the same backup weapon as I do a primary weapon, which is the Glock. The magazines interchange with the full-size magazine. If I had this security holster, the problem wouldn't have never, the series of events would have not have unfolded as they did without the proper equipment. I carried my backup weapon here and carried a pair of handcuffs in this. I tried to conceal it from the public and the bad guy that's where I carried the pistol, and that's just where you actually see me draw the weapon from. In my Class B and my Class A uniform, I have a belt that is inner Velcro, as you're all familiar with. The inner Velcro prevents the twisting of the belt. In the incident that it happened, had I had the inner Velcro, the unfamiliarity of where my handcuffs were, where my walkie-talkie was, where my backup weapon was, I wouldn't have had the problem. It's all there, it doesn't move. These are the handcuffs I used at the time, and I, as a little fella, I'm always looking for ways to get the upper hand, and with these I wasn't able to get the twist and strength on there. Once I applied that one handcuff, I feel now comfortably that had I had the hinge cuffs that I have now, I might could have applied a little more pressure and may have turned the sequence of circumstances around. Like I say, I'm small and I'm always looking for innovative ways of doing my job, and I had a thin belt, weak belt, and the belt twisted and moved, and it went around, so I went to a stiffer belt, a 3-inch Bianchi type belt that nothing moves, and therefore if nothing's unfamiliar in a situation that you have to think really fast. I felt that the ass weighed a lot, and it just really bothered me back-wise, and I found myself taking it out and laying it in the seat, and I remedied that. I went to a little Kevlar. It weighs just a few ounces, and with the walkie-talkie, I used to carry it where you had to actually pick it up, take it out, and speak into it. I went to the shoulder mic. It's there every single time I reach up. It won't fall out. It's attached to my belt. I found myself in that struggle having to unsnap the walkie-talkie and then reach in and then make sure I was pushing the right button. Well, with this, there's no mistake. I know where it's at every single time. It makes me a creature of habit. This is the camera. I had a county commissioner approach me later and state that this was $1 million county camera because it saved the particular area I was in millions of dollars from just speculated lawsuits.
Dempsey was shocked when members of the investigating agency, the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, read him his rights before questioning him.
ABI pulled me in the room with investigations, and I remember the first thing that hit me was when he says, "You have the right to remain silent." And I remember leaning back in the chair thinking, what's going on? The guy tried to kill me. Why are you reading me my rights? He asked me what happened, and I remember going on the defensive. I gave him a real short, brief scenario of what happened. He said, "First of all, I want to tell you none of the rounds were fired from the rear. And I remember thinking, I know that. So immediately I knew I was going to have to go on the defensive during the entire investigation, and I was going to have to take care of myself. In the beginning, don't give a statement. Have an attorney on standby. Join an organization that will pay for an attorney. That's not on your mind, the cost of an attorney. That should be the last thing on your mind. There's attorneys out there who represent police for free. The statement, it took me days to remember things. I remember waking up at night saying, I just remembered something else that happened. I didn't give him the statement that could have helped me. I didn't remember a lot of things till even weeks later. Or I would glance at the videotape. So imagine an officer that doesn't have a videotape to reflect back on how little he can remember of actually what happened. I would not give this statement, and probably a large percent of investigations would understand this and would not be offended if you say, because when they give you your Miranda warnings, you have the right of every citizen. You have the right to remain silent, and you just respectfully step out and say, I'd like a few minutes or I'd like a few days to clear my mind. I'm not thinking clearly now, and I can't see where they could ask you for a statement if you give them particular words. You know, I'm not thinking clearly right now. Never, never approach a crowd without a crowd. Never arrest anybody, no matter how frivolous the arrest, without somebody else standing there. That's my policy. When I moved to this new department, I spoke with my supervisor. I explained to him that I was not a coward and that I like to make the good arrest, but I'm going to have somebody there, and he's praised me on it, and most of the time I turn around and he's there. I have videotapes where I've waited, 30 minutes, but I waited and I went home. And that's all I care about is going to the house. I was given advice when I first got hired. Advice was always expect the unexpected and never underestimate your opposition. And me being the size I am, I like a lot of help. And let me tell you, police officers are dying to get over there and help you. It's a part of your uniform. If you put it on, if you put the badge on, the uniform has to have the vest under it. I learned to carry a security holster in everything. I went to the hinge handcuff versus the chain. I felt if I can get one suspect cuffed, I can take control, maybe start getting the upper hand. I carry mace. I carry the asp. You hear me say it once, you hear me say it twice. I don't have an office job. I have a job to go out there and do the job, and the stuff's heavy, sure, it's uncomfortable, sure, but that's what I'm paid to do, and I'm going to go home. You hear officers say, well, I don't train that, but this is what I'll do in that situation, and I try to remind them, hey, you're a creature of habit, and if you don't train, you're just not going to do it. I can remember going to the firing range by myself because I didn't want people to think I was gung-ho or I was a basket case, and going to the range and firing from my knees or firing from laying down, drawing my weapon. I pulled around in the back of my home when nobody could see me, and I would practice my maneuvers of what I would do in this situation or that situation. And if shots were fired, how fast could I get to my trunk to get my shotgun, or how fast could I deploy my dog? I tried to train when nobody was looking because I didn't want anybody to think, that I was some kind of weird person, but it eventually all paid off. Take cover. I train now. Take cover in every situation. Take cover. And the routine misdemeanor traffic stop to the domestic violence, I take cover or am looking for cover. And I felt if he could have taken cover, he might have won that battle. I'm in total control during the pat-down. I'm gonna keep my distance. I always keep my distance. I never let anybody invade my distance. If I was a little larger, I might have a lesser distance, but I know I'm smaller. I'm gonna allow a lot more distance, and if he starts invading it, I'm gonna take measures. But I'm gonna turn him all the way around, and I'm gonna almost always have him put his hands on something, because you watch them hands, because if the hands come off, then you can make a move. But if he's above your head, if he does above the head, he's got less movement to make aggression to you versus if I can actually get him to place his hands on something. And if I feel it's more of a felony or violent, I'll actually get him to make some moves to place more weight on his hands. Therefore, he's less of a threat to me. And then I approach, in the knife weapon. But 90% of the time or 99% of the time, when I pat somebody down, I got that second officer that's dying to do something standing there with me. And you've got to give that location, and we get relaxed in the slower times by not radioing out of the vehicle. And you think, well, I didn't have time to radio out of the vehicle because of the situation. Well, you need to start describing as soon as you step out of the vehicle, and if you are not prepared with that walkie-talkie to grab it at a moment's notice, you don't need to be out. You need to wait. There's nothing worse than not going home. I don't look it, but I stay in shape. I can run you till the cows come home. I may have to sit on you till I get help, but I will run you till the cows come home. I do a little exercising, little push-ups, and I feel it gives me a little extra edge during a struggle, and when it's over, I can feel, hey, if I hadn't exercised, I don't think I would have won that quickly. And if you take the situation under quickly, it's over quickly. And it's not over till it's over. Just as you train with the mace and you realize that you can't overcome the mace, you better learn to overcome your bite from your dog, because in a hand-to-hand, that dog, all he wants to do is help you, and he may miss. And you better be ready to take him off of you or be able to tolerate and hope he will release to re-engage.
And now, questions. From what you have seen and learned here, would you have handled this arrest any differently than Deputy Dempsey? How? Do you ever conduct a pat-down alone and from the front? Why? When is the last time you received updated ground fighting and weapon retention training? When is the last time you went to the range and practiced firing from a variety of positions? Do you agree with Officer Dempsey's contention that an officer should never be caught without a backup gun, and that a backup gun should always be the same model as your primary weapon? Are you mentally prepared for a subject to suddenly turn on you? Are you mentally prepared to deal with the inevitable investigations that follow a major incident such as this one? Are you physically prepared to deal with an unexpected and sudden ground fight? Do you rehearse worst-case scenarios in your mind and with partners? Officer Dempsey feels that like a secretary takes a pen to work, police officers should always have all their tools of the trade nearby. Do you agree with him? And do you adhere to that policy?
We're in Chicago to show you an exciting new coupling of the computer and streaming video, which the Chicago PD has developed to train its officers, and it's working. It's 7 a.m. roll call at the Chicago Police Department's 14th District. And like many law enforcement agencies nationwide, officers are watching in the line of duty. Cops here, however, aren't watching the program on video cassette. They're watching via streaming video on a computer. What the Chicago police are pioneering is almost certain to be the training wave of the future.
Streaming video is when we take it from a VHS format and we digitize it into a computer format, and then we put it onto a computer, a server, and we could stream it, buffer it into a computer. It can be viewed at any time. You can view the same file or a movie, 25 different computers, 25 different times, the same video.
And you can stop it, start it?
Stop it, start it, pause it. You can discuss it, an idea. It's a tool for a watch commander or a sergeant, field training officer to help the officers. If it saves a life, that's what it's up here for.
Indeed, every Chicago police district is now wired for streaming video.
Everything is stored on the server. More than one person at a time could use it. In fact, we had all 25 of our police districts using it simultaneously, and there was no interruption. When one person's viewing on one end, you could actually stop and review it as many times as you want without interfering with any of the other departments who care to watch the tape.
What the Chicago police computer gurus took around $50,000 to develop, largely in Sergeant Holz's basement at home, the big boys were willing to come in and build for $500,000.
Early in development, we went to a large Fortune 500 corporation involved in this business to see if we could perhaps draw on their experience in the field, and we found that we were at the same stage of development that they were. Since launching this project, we've had one vendor who characterized themselves as perhaps perhaps the only firm in the nation doing this. And they were willing to come in and build the system that we had already built at a cost of about $500,000.
And judging from the early reaction of Chicago's finest, streaming video, and we're proud to say, in the line of duty, are a hit.
Oh, I thought it was excellent. And just from looking around in the room and just seeing the look on the officer's face, you know, the tragic, and it's a shame, as I had stated before, that we have to wait till something tragic happens before something is acted upon. Whereas there, maybe they're going to take a little bit more steps forward to automatically stop and help somebody or back them up. They're going to use better weapons now. And it's a shame because we're not compatible really with the offenders on the street. They have more well-advanced equipment to use against us. We're very limited. So with that fact is all the more reason why we should always try and back each other up.
It's a quality tape. It's one of the best, it is the best tape I've seen in the last 30 years. It brings the department, what we do on the job, to heart. It brings it where it makes you think next time you go out there and do a street stop. And especially with the younger officers that are on the job for 1 or 2 years, it'll make them think. You can have so much training in academy where an instructor reads to you. You have to read a book. If you see it in the motion, you can see the outline of the gun in the man's pocket where he's got his hand in his pocket. You could stop it at this point, pause it, and you can point it out. And say, here you can see the outline of the gun. This is what Officer Coates missed during his stop. We don't want to second guess Officer Coates, but he did miss it. Hopefully next time it happens, we don't miss it. You be more astute to what's going on.
And for smaller departments, Lieutenant Roberts says basically all you need to get started is a computer, a server, and a digital capture card.
I see no reason why it can't be done for a smaller department. I think it's an excellent opportunity. We're characterizing it much like we have 25 small districts comprising our entire jurisdiction, they can operate independently and view any films they wish or according to our airing schedule. But if you were to consider one of our districts a small police facility, they can reach into the server and they have a video library that they can draw upon. And not only films, but also any other types of instructional media that you can think of. I've mentioned PowerPoint, but we've also considered putting in the criminal law and our general orders, which is currently online, but making available other reference and resource materials to our field officers whenever they need it. So a small department could use this in much the same way that we would in a single district.
If you're interested in learning more about how streaming video can soon be playing on a computer near you, contact Sergeant Holtz or Officer Henderson at the number you see on your screen. Or call In the Line of Duty at 1-800-462-5232. Ask for John Tolman, our resident computer guru, and we will help you get started. Or email John at lineofduty@aol.com.
Finally, look at what a Colorado cop found in a clothing store. Pants and sneakers with secret pockets, perfect for storing drugs or worse. If anything underscores the critical need for thorough pat-downs, it's these items of clothing, complete with hidden pockets. These sneakers have a 4 1/2 inch by 3 inch pocket, very capable of holding a .22 revolver or just about any contraband you could imagine. The pockets are Velcroed just below the tongue, and if a cop isn't very alert to the possibilities, the results could be tragic. These baggy pants have a Velcroed secret pocket along the inseam just below the crotch and would require the officer literally to squeeze along the inseam to make certain nothing dangerous, even life-threatening, is being kept from the search. Special thanks to Officers Scott Pierce and Lorraine Fratelli of the Longmont, Colorado Police for emailing us these photos and sharing this important information with fellow officers everywhere. That's this month's edition of In the Line of Duty. What did you think of the Chicago Police Department's use of streaming video? We'd like to hear from you. Email us at lineofduty@aol.com, or you can phone us at 1-800-462-5232. I'm Don Marsh.
And I'm Ron Barber from the Chicago Police Department's District 14. Thanks for watching, and remember, next time we may be watching you in the line of duty.